There's a Spartan idea that doesn't get talked about very much. It's not about shields or formations or bravery. It's quieter than that, more psychological. The idea is this: before you step into a battlefield, you don't just prepare your body. You prepare who you are allowed to be once the fighting starts. You split yourself. The Spartans understood something that most people never consciously learn. There are parts of you that make sense in normal life, and there are parts of you that will get you killed under pressure. So they trained themselves to leave certain parts behind. When a Spartan entered combat, he wasn't fully himself. He wasn't a son, he wasn't a friend, he wasn't a man with preferences, doubts, or internal debate. He became a function. That sounds extreme, but the insight behind it is deeply practical and very relevant now. Because modern battlefields look different, but the psychological problem is exactly the same. When you step into something that matters, a confrontation, a competition, a negotiation, a hard conversation, a risky decision, you don't just bring skills with you, you bring identity, and most people bring too much of it. They bring the part of themselves that wants to be liked, the part that wants to explain, the part that wants fairness, reassurance, and emotional safety. Those parts aren't bad, they're just misplaced. You bring identity, and most people bring too much of it. They bring the part of themselves that wants to be liked, the part that wants to explain, the part that wants fairness, reassurance, and emotional safety. Those parts aren't bad, they're just misplaced. The Spartan solution wasn't to suppress emotion permanently, it was to context switch identity. There was a version of you for the city and a version of you for the field. And confusing the two was considered dangerous. Think about how many people today fail, not because they lack ability, but because the wrong version of themselves shows up at the wrong moment. They hesitate because they're trying to be reasonable when decisiveness is required. They soften when firmness is needed. They over-explain because silence feels uncomfortable. They negotiate with themselves in moments that demand action. That internal negotiation is exactly what Spartans trained out of themselves. Not by becoming mindless, but by becoming deliberate. Before battle, the decision-making was already done. Who you were allowed to be had been decided in advance. Once the fight began, there was no room for inner dialogue, no space for second-guessing, no time for self-expression, only execution. What's important here is that this wasn't emotional repression, it was emotional containment. The Spartans weren't stoic because they felt nothing. They were stoic because they refused to let feeling interfere with function. That distinction matters. In modern life, people are told to be authentic at all times, to bring their whole self everywhere, to never compartmentalize. That advice sounds humane, but it breaks down under pressure. Because some environments punish openness, some moments punish reflection, some situations punish hesitation. The Spartan understood that identity is situational. You don't always need the same self. There's a version of you that is reflective, curious, empathetic, open. That version belongs in relationships, in learning, in recovery. And there's another version of you that is narrow, focused, almost blunt. That version belongs in competition, conflict, and moments of consequence. The mistake people make is trying to merge them. They want to be both at once, and that creates friction. You can see this clearly in combat sports. You've probably felt it yourself. The rounds where you're half thinking, half acting, where you hesitate because you're considering options instead of committing, where you're aware of how you look instead of what needs to be done. Those rounds feel messy, unclear, inefficient, and then there are rounds where something switches, the noise drops, choices narrow, your behavior becomes simpler but sharper. That's not randomness, that's identity selection. For a moment, the right version of you showed up. The Spartans didn't leave that to chance. They ritualized it. Everything about their preparation, the discipline, the repetition, the sameness was designed to make the transition automatic. When the moment came, there was no question of who they were supposed to be. They had already decided. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Most people avoid this kind of splitting because it feels inauthentic, or cold, or even dangerous. They worry that if they allow themselves to become harder in certain contexts, they'll lose something permanently. But the Spartan model wasn't about becoming hard forever. It was about putting hardness on required and taking it off afterward. In fact, the danger comes from not doing this consciously. If you don't choose when to compartmentalize, stress will do it for you, and it will do it badly. People who never define their battle self often end up reactive, brittle, or emotionally overloaded. They either collapse under pressure or they become harsh everywhere. Neither is power. Power is control over when you narrow yourself. The practical question then isn't should I do this, it's where do I need a different version of myself? Where are you currently entering situations with too much softness, or too much explanation, or too much need for mutual understanding? And where are you staying in battle mode when it's no longer necessary? The Spartan lesson isn't to become less human, it's to become more precise. To know which parts of you belong in which moments. To stop asking in the middle of pressure, who should I be right now? That decision should already be made, because once you're in it, once the conversation has started, once the round is underway, once the stakes are live, clarity beats cleverness. And presence beats personality. That's the split. And learning to make it, consciously and cleanly, is one of the most underappreciated skills in both ancient warfare and modern life.